Hello, welcome back to week three and part two of microeconomics for the summer. If I'm a little down, it's because I had a bad day yesterday. I spilled spot remover on my dog, and now he's gone. Um, all right, I don't have a dog named Spot, and then, all the rest. It's a joke. But I just wanted to spend a few minutes on this weekly video blog. First of all, talking a little bit about last week, and then again, as always, introducing you to some of the things coming up this week as we go through the thing. I'm going to change my camera here to see if I can get a little bit out of that. Yeah, there's a weird glare from the brights. That's a little better. Anyway, I think so. I don't know. Maybe I'm better in shadows. What do you think? No, it doesn't matter. Okay. But last week, of course, the big item, there were some other graded assignments, and you can check out my feedback and let me know if you have questions. But the big item, of course, was Celebration of Knowledge number one. For the most part, I have to say that I was pretty pleased. If you are not as pleased with your particular results, don't panic. The story is that there's a lot of points left. There's some extra credit opportunities coming up, um, and one exam score won't kill you. But what we need to do, of course, going forward is figuring out a better way to do this. So how can you either devote the time that's necessary and/or seek out the help that's necessary from me or elsewhere to up your game and make the next two exams and the next two sections of the class that much stronger? So get in touch with me, right? Email me, give me a call. We can set up a virtual appointment or an appointment on campus, and I'm happy to help with that. If you want to see, your exam and the questions that you missed, I do not make the answer key available and post it, but you're welcome to, set up an appointment with me, and we'll look at it together, and we'll talk through and look at what you missed. And I want you to understand that content, excuse me, and why you got what you wrong. Why you got wrong. I can't talk today. Why you got wrong what you did and what the right answers are. So that's last week. We're moving forward. We're in the second section of the course, as I said. And this week, week three, we're going to cover some what I think are super, super important topics. The first one is the topic of market failure and government failure. And so, when it comes to market failure, we sort of pretended, in many ways, that's the right word, that this supply and demand thing from the last couple of weeks was kind of magical in the sense that there was this invisible hand of Adam Smith. And markets seemed to be efficient, and the prices that they came up with were right. Although we said, well, wait a minute, they're not always, and that's why we talked about price ceilings and price floors. But we're going to delve more into that this week and talk about market failure. Um, Markets don't always work in terms of producing what's best from the social or societal perspective. There's a few reasons for that. We're going to delve into three main ones this week. The first one is the public goods problem, and that is that there are a number of goods that we like to have that make our lives better that people can get if they don't pay for it. And that's a problem in a private market system because markets are based on profits and utility and all that kind of stuff. Private profits, right, by private businesses. So there's a problem if people can get something without paying for it, and that is the private businesses would never produce that product, or at least not enough of it. And yet there are things, like I said, that we would like to have that are public goods that make our lives better. Adequate snow removal in the wintertime, street lighting, right? Lighthouses along the shores of Lake Michigan, Lake Superior, all those kinds of things. Police and fire protection, et cetera, et cetera. And you might be saying, wait a minute, Ron, I pay for those. I pay taxes. And the answer is, so do I pay taxes. But the reason that the government steps in and doesn't just allow private for-profit businesses to provide these things is that there wouldn't be enough of these public goods produced in a private market. And so we may need, and I would argue we do need, and depending on how it's done, government intervention and tax collections to make sure we have adequate provision of these public goods. The second case of market failure we're talking about is externalities. When private choices lead to harm or benefit that spill over onto third parties, people that had nothing to do with the transaction, the private market, the quote unquote free market, ignores that and says, who cares? But you and I might care. Society, we might care, right? For example, pollution, which the private company might say, well, if I can get away with it, I'm going to pollute because then I can make more profits and not pay for it. But we pay for it. And so the private market would ignore that and produce too much of the bad stuff. And it would also produce too little of the good stuff because when there are benefits that spill over, the market says, who cares, the private market? And yet we might care. I mean, you're all getting financial aid to come to this college. And you're like, oh, I'm not. The answer is yes, you are. Because the tuition that you're paying is only a small fraction of the total cost of you being at the school. The rest of it's being subsidized by your neighbors, right, who pay property taxes and also income taxes through the state help to make sure we have enough funds to make enough seats available for enough students at an affordable price. And so the moral of the story is that private markets, just private markets, produce too much of the bad and too little of the good. So if we care about those things, there is a role for government intervention to change the price of engaging in the activity. We'll delve more into that. The third case of market failure is one we're going to talk a lot more about in coming weeks, but it's when there's monopoly power, or what we call market power. That is when there's control over markets by a small number, maybe just a single firm. They're not going to do what's best for the society, right? With a couple of exceptions. There's always exceptions in life. There's always those two. Wait a minute, this could be, yeah, we'll talk about those too. But generally speaking, monopoly power, whatever power there is, tends to create inefficiencies that harm the society. And we'll look at that as well. In addition, once we do that, the second part of material for this week, content for this week, is delving into what's known as the theory of consumer choice. What that says is, why do consumers behave the way they do? Why do individuals, so this is really micro, small level, individual level decision making. Why do you and I as individual consumers choose to buy what we buy with the budget that we have, the prices that we face, and the preferences or the tastes that we have for the different things we could spend our money on? How do we make that choice? And so we're going to spend some time this week looking at the traditional model of rational, like Mr. Spock on the old TV series Star Trek or movie Star Trek. Maybe you don't know that, but many of you probably do. Pretty iconic. That were Vulcans. We're not really Vulcans, but that were rational. That we look at the benefits and costs and make choices. So we're going to introduce that model and think about how that model predicts behavior and models the demand curve. But then we're going to spend some time, which I think you'll find really pretty interesting, looking at how we wed psychology of behavior with economics in a subfield of economics now known as behavioral economics. And so that looks at the question of, are we always rational or are we often irrational? And if we are irrational, are we irrational in predictable ways? Because if we're predictably irrational, then we can design policies to get people to behave in the ways that we might like. And so if you're like, that sounds pretty controlling, but the answer is other people are doing it to us. And so we want to understand that so we can make better decisions and understand how we might get better outcomes if we so desire that. So behavioral economics, pretty fascinating. Okay, so in terms of, before we talk about the assignments this week real briefly, you know what you do if you break your arm in two places? You don't go back to those two places. That's pretty wise advice if you ask me. Anyway, I want to talk about the assignments for this week. So there's two personal journals. The first one is just a reflection on online learning and how the course is going so far in terms of what's easy for you and what are the things that you find challenging with respect to the format and that kind of thing. So that won't take long. It's just a journal, right? That's due by Sunday, the end of the night on Sunday. As is the second personal journal, which has to do with racism. And its impact on everybody. So not just the people who are directly harmed, but how it impacts the broader society. So this relates to, concepts of externality and public goods related to a podcast, a video that I'm going to ask you to watch and then make some comments on. There'll also be a weekly quiz, as always, 2 attempts, the whole drill. The second problem set, it's not due until next week, right, on Thursday. But as always, I make it available the week before so you can get a head start on that. So please do. It'll make getting the assignment in by the end of the night on Thursday next week easier for you. And then there's always a lot of practice things, right? The Quizlets, the practice multiple choice questions, the supplemental videos, all of that good stuff. And then, as you know, the way this works, right, is that we'll have a second celebration of knowledge, not this week. This is week 3. But at the end of week 4 as we go through this quick 6-week summer class. So I got like 20 seconds. I'm going to try to end this before 10 minutes unless I keep talking for the next 15 seconds, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stop right now. So on that note, have a good one. Take care. You know how to get in touch with me if you have questions. Woo!